Hi, this is Dave Windhorst, visual effects artist currently based out of Vancouver. Today I want to talk about the Global Directory Read Setup Pack, or GD Read Setup Pack, that I previously used in a tutorial on installing custom scripts and menus inside the Nuke interface. If you remember on the left here, we created this menu of 3 commands, and essentially today we're going to cover what those 3 commands were. So if you've ever used Nuke, at some point you've either moved image read files around or you've changed workstations and you've had to copy locally all of the read nodes and the script itself that you're using. And again, anyone who's ever done this, as soon as you open it up, because all the directories have been changed, you get this in your Nuke screen, or a bunch of errors for all your read nodes. And as we can see up here, it's because our read error says there's no such file or directory. So what these 3 script commands are going to do is allow us to associate a special type of node to all the read nodes such that we can either fix read node errors that have occurred in this script, or we can prevent at least this from happening in other scripts by placing these special nodes in first. So we've got a lot to cover today, so let's get started. So first things first, you need to download the pack from my resources portion of my website. So if you go over to scripts, you can see the Nuke script global directory read setup pack. So if you come down here, when it's available, you'll be able to download, and essentially you'll receive a .zip folder to pull up here, which looks like this. So you'll get a README that explains everything I'm talking about here. You also get an icons folder which contains the images used for the Nuke menu. You get a Python folder which houses our actual script setup. And you'll also receive an init and a menu file. And these two are important. These are what required to allow us to have our custom menu inside of Nuke here, to have this setup. So if you haven't already, please take a look at the first tutorial available on installing custom files and custom menus, and it'll explain exactly how to how to put all these in and such. As I show here, my .nuke folder, I've already have an init file, I already have my menu file, and I've already installed that script, and I've also placed my icons in here. So once you're able to run once you're able to place everything in your .nuke folder, when you open up Nuke the next time, you should receive this special menu down here with 3 commands. So we're going to cover those. So first things first, we're going to take a look at an existing read node, and just essentially it's already at a correct path. So if I view it, I'm already seeing the path. If I open it up over here, as you can see, I'm looking at the current area exactly the way it needs to be. So the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to try and associate these such that we're no longer looking at an absolute path. That's what Nuke is doing by default. It's using this entire directory listing to get to this image sequence. This is what we call an absolute path. So we're essentially going to make it a, so to speak, pseudo absolute path. We're going to make the read file be relative and make another node be the direct root file, or root path I should say. So what we have here on the first command is a global directory, which is a node. So I have it mapped to the hotkey A at this point. So if I hit it, I've created a node called global directory. So if I look at this node, all that's available to me is this proj-dir, basically this file sequence directory option. So the idea is, by itself, this node does nothing. We can go in here and I can specify where my project is residing currently. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to hit open. And all you can see is we've essentially labeled where this node is looking at currently. So again, by itself, we haven't done anything. This read node is still fully seeing its path. However, we now have a global directory node, which allows us to specify a directory to use other nodes to look at. So this is our root node, and we're now going to turn our file node a read file into an associated node to this global directory node. And we have a couple ways of doing that. The first way is by going into our global directory node. If we switch over to our node tab, we have this value global directory and then the global directory node we're using, which is 11, .projdir. Now if you take this and copy it and manually place it such that what's up here is going to be replaced down here. So essentially I'm already looking at test project. So if I go to where shot is and I delete this and replace the code, so now I have value global directory 11.projdir, and then I have my shot 001 and then my image file. If I do this and hit enter, Nuke has created an expression, or in this case I'm going to refer to these as associations based on how they're being used. So this read file is no longer looking at the direct path. It is instead getting a root path from this global directory node and injecting that into this read file node's beginning as a root path, which is connected then with the rest of our file to replace it. So that we've basically associated this read node this way. So that's the manual way we can do this. We also have another way, which is we have our second command, which is the gd read associate selected. So we can select this read node and our global directory node and essentially just run global gd read associate selected. And as you can see, if I open this node up, we've injected that same code as we did manually, but now it's done automatically. So now I can quickly run in here and see that it's associated as well. Now there is a third way we can do that, and that's if we have our GD read setup. So the way this window works is we can either specify a new global directory node, or we can select from a list of global directory nodes. So I'm going to select our number 11. The nice thing about this node select is it's basically listing every global directory node available in your Nuke script at this time. So you don't have to go looking around for a specific node. You can actually select it and it'll tell you here where that node is looking at. So this allows you to quickly associate read nodes that you haven't created yet right on the fly. So this essentially would replace your read node command. So we've selected our global directory 11. We're now going to open up our file. So I'm going to go here, select our file, hit open, and now I'm going to say generate read node. So what we've done in the background, you can see, is we've read in a new read node, and we've automatically connected it as soon as it was read in to our global directory node. So that's the third command that we have. So another thing I want to show you is with our commands, if I copy and paste this read node, with our global directory read associate selected, we're actually able to associate multiple files at one time. So if I select all these read nodes and I select my global directory node and then run gd read associate selected, you can see I've now connected all three of these at one time. So again, it's a faster way of being able to associate them all to this path. So the nice thing is, once this has been associated, we can just come up here, and if we have to change our project settings, we can just come in here and type in where to look now for the nodes that are associated to it. So we basically have cut back on only having to change one node versus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 nodes. So that's the first example. So our second example that I want to show is basically we have two existing read nodes, but we want to be able to look at them at different levels. So we have two global directory nodes, available here. We've got one that is only looking at the C drive, and we have one that's only looking at C drive, users, Dave, demo reel, projects. So the point of this is to show that these nodes will essentially look at your read files and determine how far it needs to associate by. So if I select this one, run my GD read associate selected, you can see if I open this up that essentially it's replacing my C drive as listed by the global directory, but it's keeping my users, Dave, demo reel, projects test. So it's keeping all the rest of the structure inside the read node. Whereas if I use this node and run my GD read associate selected, you can see here, instead of just replacing the C drive, we replaced everything, the C drive, users, Dave, demo reel, projects, and then we continue on with the rest of the talk. So again, this allows us to work at different levels with our read nodes, as well as different levels with our global directory nodes. So essentially, the thing to point out here is it's important what you call your global directory node, because that'll determine how much association it has in regards to the read node. So now for our next example, we're going to be covering what you've probably been asking about from the very get-go, which is what do we do with a wrong path. So essentially this portion of the script was given to me by another user. So user Brad, this is where all his read nodes are looking from, is C drive users Brad. Well, since I'm not Brad, I'm a different person, Dave, I'm on a workstation. All his read nodes in his script that he gave me are coming out with errors. So the unfortunate thing we have here is just by running our GD read associate selected, we can't tell where these files are by default. So you've got only two options you can do here. You can either inject manually into every one of these your global directory node, which I've created here already. So this is looking at C drive, users, Dave, demo reel, projects, test project, and these files are located in C drive users Brad. So the problem we run in here is by default it will not be able to associate these. So we actually have to tell Nuke where these read files are now located at. However, instead of having to do one at a time by double clicking on our image and then coming up in here and changing it, it's beneficial to instead create this global directory node still and select all the read nodes you want to fix, as well as the global directory node. We can run the GD read associate selected, and it'll warn us. It'll say, hey, this image file that we're reading in does not associate to the selected GD node. So either we're missing subfolders or it does not exist in the current directory, which is true. We're bringing in image files from a different computer. So it's telling you where the read directory is looking for, and this is where our global directory node is currently set to. So we can attempt to correct this manually. So I'm going to say yes. So what I'm able to do is locate my Nuke unstored spider shot, which is right here. So I'm going to hit this and hit open. And now I've associated. You can see here it's already created the association. And already Nuke is warning me on the next one that, hey, this one's not matching up either. So this is the Spider's Light RGB pass. I'm going to hit yes. So I'm going to back up. I'm going to go over to my Maya renders, and I'm going to find my Lights RGB pass, so it's here. Hit open. Again, you can see it's already associated that pass now inside the Nuke script. So now I'm looking for my depth pass, which is here. And then it's also got one more. So again, to know which one you're looking for, it says right here, Spider ISO Spider is what I'm looking for. So I found it, hit open, and now I've created it, and automatically my script has rebuilt itself such that I can see that I've replaced my directories. And so to double check this, if I open up my read node, you can see it's now injected that code. It's now not only fixed the paths, but it's also injected it to read from that global directory node. And I'll show why in a minute this is important. Again, even though it's basically, you could be taking the same amount of time as you would replacing all your read file nodes with either fixing them manually or just rereading the stuff in. The problem you'll have is next time you move it to another computer, you have to do it all over again. So the idea is by associating them now, next time I move my files or if I have to open them from another workstation, I'll be able to. I just have to change this one node now. So I'll be showing that in a minute here. So let's continue on. This relates back to having our global directory nodes on different levels. You can also nest your global directory nodes. So as you've seen before here, we've got our projects. You know, this is essentially our C drive users Dave demo reel project test project, and then these are files that it's finding inside of it. So like this one here, this spider is actually located in a subfolder of the test project called Maya renders cgfin, and then its pass number. So if you run into options or issues where you need to quickly associate more than one file in a subdirectory, instead of linking this file here straight up to my global directory node, which is at my test project level, I can actually create a new global directory node, and I'm going to navigate to where I want it to go look at. So I want it to look at shot001. So if I open that up and navigate to that, I can select these two and associate them. So now I've got a read node that's associated all the way up to its image base name. So I can either associate it this way, or if I know that I'm going to change something with my project at some point or change the structure, I can actually associate this global directory node to this one. And so the way we do that is you have to manually inject this global directory's code into this global directory. So I'm going to copy and remove. I just want the shot1 folder, so I'm going to remove this, paste it in, and I'm going to name my directory node to the correct one, which is number 2. So now if I hit enter, you can now see at first it doesn't look like it's associated, and once I select that node, all of a sudden it shows up, and that's because by default on our global directory node, if I open it up, we have this hide input set. So if you turn this input off, clear this, you'll be able to now see that setup that we're currently running off of. So the idea is this read node is still legible. What it's doing though is it's piggybacking over to this global directory 12, which is C drive users Dave demo reel projects test project shot1. That's what it says, but in fact it's really shot001. It is then getting its own reference from this global directory node. So the nice thing is, by doing this, you can actually nest your global directory nodes such that you can mimic your folder structure that's in your operating system. So over here in my project shot1, I've got my files, or if I back up, I've got my Maya files separated. I can essentially mimic that folder structure inside of Nuke, so I can see a visual representation. So if I come over here to example 2, you can see how I've already set that up, such that I am looking at my C drive all the way to my test project. I then come down here to my next global directory, which is reading into the Maya renders folders, and then it's breaking it up into what the cgfin folder has and then what my cg version 2 folder has. So again, it allows me to just organize a little bit more. This is definitely not necessary at this point. It's just, again, it's an option. It allows you to just, again, nest in such that way that you can quickly organize. So if you know you've always got a Maya folder in your project, or you've always got a Nuke folder on your project, you can quickly set those folders up inside Nuke, and that way all you have to worry about is the actual project name and changing that. All your subfolders will stay the same. That's one method of doing this. So what I'm going to do now at this point, now that we've covered all of that, again, I know it's a lot, we're going to essentially break this file. And what we're going to do is we're going to exit out of Nuke here, and we're going to come over to our project file, and we're gonna find out. This is definitely not a good example, but this is an example nonetheless. Right now it's called test project, and I find out later on down the road that the project name is really spider project, and I'm supposed to be matching, conforming to a naming convention. So this is our actual project name. So by putting it in a temporary test project folder, that's bad on me, but we fixed it now. So obviously what's going to happen is as soon as we run Nuke and go to open our file, so we go to our spider project, Nuke, so we go to open up this file, and as you can see, lo and behold, we've got an error. All of these read nodes. So this is what you're probably used to seeing when you've just changed a directory or you've moved stuff around. So as you can see, this is that error. So you're still going to get it initially. However, if you remember what I said, because these files are now being read relatively based on this first node, all you have to change is this first node to where you want it to look. So instead of projects test project, we're going to go to spider project and hit open. And as you can see, I've just rebuilt all those read nodes in one node, one click. So again, each of these can be done that way and fixed that way as needed. Some limitations you will run into, for example, I did want to point this one out. If you remember, this is why it's important to know where your directory nodes are reading from. So like in this one, we're using only the C drive. Well, the problem we run into here is that this read node is looking all the way up through another portion of the structure that doesn't exist anymore. And so just by changing this read node, if I come in here and I say my spider project, it still doesn't fix the issue, and that's because this read node is still reading all of what we just gave it, as well as all the way back at users Dave demo reel. So what we need to do is, instead of just changing this one node, we can then go and say the GD read associate selected. So it warns me, hey, these don't exist in the right area. We can then come in here and I'm going to tell it it exists here. And now it works because we've now correctly associated where our file is looking at. Again, we can come in here to each one of these and change it to what we need. And this one, again, this one has the same issue as this one, because we're reading at a project level or at a directory level above where we changed our directories. This one would have to be changed using the associate selected or manually coming in and rechanging it. So there is going to still be that changing your read nodes or rereading them in, but you're still able to save time. So this one was the one I was pointing out earlier, where we've now associated all of these. If I come in here, specify spider project, and hit open, you can see we've rebuilt our script back up in just one change. So again, this is just providing some tools. This isn't the only way of fixing this, but it does speed up workflow in being able to change only one directory that affects others. There are limitations, mainly based on your operating system file structure. This is currently working in Windows 64-bit operating system, so you can see I've been able to quickly build within Windows what I need based on the folder structure. It hasn't been tested on Mac or Linux, as I don't have those available to me to test. So if any feedback on that would be nice. And any other things, let me just think here, anything else that needs to be covered. Essentially, we've fixed everything, bringing it in. So just to recap, if I come up here, we 3 commands. So we've got the global directory node, which again by itself does nothing. We give it a root directory. So I'm going to say spider project. It's now looking to that directory to give it that path to other nodes. We've got a couple options. We can either read in a file and either inject it manually using under our global directory node tab. We can copy and paste this label into wherever we want it to follow such that this directory matches. So whatever is listed here gets replaced here. We can do that manually, or we can select them and run our second command, or our gd read associate selected, which will automatically associate them if it's already existing. Or if we read in another shot, we can do the same thing. So I'm using the shortcut key, the key that I made, Control+R. So again, these are both associated to the same thing now. Or we can use our GD read setup, where we can either create a new GD node, which will be basically we have to specify where we want to look at. So I'm going to say shot 2. I'm going to generate a read node, or a GD node. So that's created one right here. And now it automatically switches to it. We can create our read node, which will be connected to it. Or inside that GD read setup, we can say I already have a node, so we'll use 13, and I want to read spider set, generate, okay, and we've also done it that way. So again, 3 commands, the node itself, automatically associating selected or fixing selected, and then set up for creating read nodes automatically connected to our GD directory nodes. So again, this isn't the surefire fix everything method, but it'll allow you to speed up on fixing or at least preventing read errors, such that if you set this up when you create your initial script file, as soon as you give it to someone else, they can change, 1 or 2 nodes, any of these GD directory nodes, you can change them and everything will update. Elsewise, if you're opening up another script that's been filled with error or read nodes, then you can at least fix them by going through one at a time with the script and automatically associating them on creation. So hopefully you've learned something out of this that isn't typical for Nuke. That's the one downside, is not being able to do relative read nodes, instead doing absolute directory paths. So this is a pseudo method of somewhere between relative and absolute. Again, there are limitations and there are errors that can happen. So this is either based on folder structure, or even just if they update versions of Nuke. So use as much as you want to or as little as you want to, depending on your needs. So if you have any questions or comments, you can post below, or feel free to email me and I'll try to get back as soon as possible. And let me know how it works. If it's doing some really interesting stuff, or stuff that I didn't even think about in regards to these scripts, definitely I'd like to hear how they've been utilized in such a way that it works. So thank you, and have a good one.